It's a little less these days, but there were days that people really thought I was Chinese, especially when I was living in China. I remember even going to the airport, people would just they would come up to me and then go, where is restroom, by the way, in Chinese. So I had to say, respond that to that person in Chinese, and explaining, by the way, I'm not Chinese, but I spoke in Chinese. So they were confused and all that. Now, like I said, when I was in China, people thought I was Chinese, but then they realized, soon I was not. Not only in English, but in Chinese too, I have an accent. So you hear me speaking English or Chinese, they know something is not right, but I don't know what it is. At the same time, we were living in a city called Kunming back in those days. They had a dialect too, local dialect. I couldn't speak dialect either. But not only that, they knew right away that I was not Chinese because I had 3 daughters. Not many Chinese have more than 1 child. So, they know, again, they probably were thinking, is he from Taiwan or Hong Kong or Singapore? But then, I usually tell them I'm not Chinese. I wonder how people know we're not non-Christians. How do people know we're Christians? The real, authentic, God-loving, genuine Christians. How do people know? Unless you tell them, by the way, I'm Chinese. I'm Christian. The Chinese thing is all of my, I am Christian. But before you say that, how do they know you're Christian? I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm reading a passage from a book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 1 to 4. I realize that that whole text is on your bulletin, but I have mine on ESV, so I'm going to read that. It's up on the screen too. As I get older, even that is a little bit fuzzy from here to so I'll look over here and then. Why don't we all read that together with one voice? Okay, shall we? Let's go. Now the Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred, your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abraham went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from, not Haran. It's a Hebrew word. Not Lot, it's Lot, by the way. I was listening to the audio, the Bible tape, paying attention to, because I'm going to speak tomorrow. The next day, I was doing it yesterday, in English. So it's not Lot, it's Lot, by the way. The title is the blessing. I want to take a look at those 3 verses and just make 3 points out of it. Why are we blessed? I mean, the Christians, we must understand and acknowledge that we are blessed people. So from this passage, this is the one that I like very much. If someone asks me, why did you go to China? What made you to go to China? And I go back to this verse, this passage here. It's not Matthew 28. For me, it was this particular passage that really encouraged me and even challenged me, to go to that land that God showed me. God placed it in my heart, and I went to China with my family after my first visit to Beijing, the capital of China, in 1986. But it took me 10 years to go back as a family. But what made me go there? It comes from this passage here. You look at verse 1. Abraham, whose name will be Abraham sooner or later. So I think for us, I call him Uncle Ab. You guys can call it Grandpa Ab. Depends on your age. We read from verse 1, and God is calling him. We don't know how he got to know God, but if you read from Genesis chapter 6, we can get a glimpse out of that whole story, how people on earth, they knew God. When Noah had, when God sent flood, and Noah and his family, Out of those 3 sons, we have whole the ethnicity, the peoples on earth. And after the fall, after the flood, God gave a rainbow. What was the meaning of the rainbow? It was God's promise. I'm not going to judge you, mankind, with the water anymore. So when they saw rainbow after rain, people are talking about what does that mean? So they heard, probably, most likely, that is God's sign. God is telling us He will not judge us with water anymore, by water anymore. So now Abraham, we don't know exactly how he got to know God, but God appeared to him in verse 1. And He tells him, He calls him, He tells him what to do. That whole calling, God is calling us. Even our salvation. None of us in this room, in sanctuary, will say, because I was good enough to gain, to earn the grace of God, God saved me. Good Presbyterian wouldn't say that. It is all by God's grace. He chose me. He selected me. We even use the word, He elected me to be His child. Very similar to how God called Abraham. Not only that, He is calling him to leave everything behind. His household, his relatives and friends and property, and move on to the place that He will show. We are blessed because we are called by God, starting with our salvation. We are blessed because God is still calling us to do what He wants us to do. When we went to China, like many people, many of you know, people still ask me, why did you go to China? I remember even my in-laws were puzzled, and they were asking, why do you have to go to China? Why can't you stay here in America, in the States? Someone like you who started my ministry when I was in college with a broken English. Over the years, I learned how to work with, second gen 1.5 in English. Why do you have to go to China? At the end of the day, I had to tell my in-laws, because God is calling me. I know that in my heart, so I need to go. And I was I think one of the benefits that I had when we went to China was, I had some credit card debt. It was finally paid off. How? We sold everything, and we used that to pay off the debt. So we were able to go to China. That was a great, the relief. And God calls us. And when we respond to that, we know we are blessed, because God is calling us to do what He wants us to do. A life we call life worthy of the Lord. Something that God wants you to do, whatever that is going to be, whatever that is right now. And when we do that, we know we are blessed. Abraham, why did he leave everything behind? His kindred, his household, property and all that? Because God said so. I want you to live. I can identify with Abraham a little bit because, even though I told my wife and my daughters, they were too young to understand that. First one was not even 4. Second daughter was not even 1. You know who they are. So I didn't have to tell them, we're going to China. What is China? It's not where. What is China? Why? For them, as long as we are with them, they're happy. But even though I knew where I was going, I was still very nervous, very afraid. I knew when we get there would be no one waiting for us, except someone from the school that we were going to attend to learn Chinese. But for Abraham, God is telling him to go to the land I will show you. He doesn't even know where he's going to, but he did, because God told him so. Now, when God does that to us, when God called Abraham, he gave him a great promise, verse 2. I will make a great nation out of you, and I'm going to bless you, those who bless you. Those who bless you, I'm going to curse those who dishonors you. And I'll make a great nation out of you. And then through you, this is what I'm going to do. Now again, God is the one who does promise blessings to us. As a good Christian, and God's children. And have you ever thought about this? I did, and I don't know why. There are people who have outstanding, very smart brain like someone sitting in our midst too, who read just textbook and who knows inside out, and who, when that person takes the test, he gets 100%. We know people who have an amazing voice. I get criticized by my own beloved one, my wife. You have a bad voice. When I lead, especially during the pre-dawn prayer meeting, I lead, hymnal up on the stage right there. And there were days that my wife would tell me, by the way, it was out of tune. You know that? You got to do it right next time. But there are people who can sing so beautifully, amazing voice, amazing looks. I know a man from our church who is like Mr. MacGyver. He knows how to fix everything. Whenever I see him, I go, how do you do that? When even for me, even nailing, I hit my finger with a hammer. Boom! It's right there, but then that's to the side, and I hit right here. So my wife tells me, you better not do that. All these gifts and talents, how were they wired like that? What happened? And then I want to ask you, when you were born, when you were in mother's womb, did you design your own voice, your own brain, and all that? It was given to you. Now, I'm not saying, don't you ever think you are stupid. I have a stupid brain. I don't understand. Now, you better not say that, because God is the one who made you. God is the one who made you to sing like that, have a great, if I can say, brain or talents and gifts. Now, again, we see from verse 2, God is the one who called Abraham. He's promising, I am going to bless you. I'm going to make a great nation out of you. I'm going to bless those who bless you. I'm going to curse those who curses you. Now, those phrases, those two sentences, basically meaning if people reject God, then I'm going to curse them. Okay? If people accept God through Abraham, his descendants, and I'm going to bless them. The whole blessing is basically knowing God. And then there's a reason why God did that. Why did God call Abraham? Why did God promise amazing, awesome, just beyond our imagination, blessings to Abraham? Because he wants every family, all the families of the world, will come to know who God is. And that's why God called, God promised blessings, and at the end, now this is the punchline, at the end of the day, you got to respond. 75 years old man. He lived up to 120 years old. So he's not young anymore. I'm not young anymore. You're still young, but I'm not. I'm getting in that bracket. In 2-3 years, when I go to a McDonald's, they'll go, "You're a senior citizen," and I'll get my discount on it. 75 cents coffee. It's coming. Well, the people are 75 years old. When God called him to leave everything behind and go to the land he would show, Abraham could have said, God, you know what? I am already 75 years old. I'm old. I'm already all settled down here. You know how rich I am? You blessed me, so I can use all this right here in the States. I can use all this for you. Why are you telling me to go? I'm not going. He could have said that, but he didn't. Verse 4, we know. What did he do? He obeyed, he went. Hebrews, author of Hebrew, he describes the whole thing. By faith, Abraham, he listened to God, and he obeyed, he went. He left, and he began a journey. Like I told you, I share with you, why did I go to China with my family? Because I knew in my heart God was calling me. And believe it or not, I have tried. I did try to stay in the States. I even looked for a position in a church. It's not because nobody wanted me to come and work in a particular church, but at the end of the day, I had this strong discomfort and this calling. There's something was telling me, didn't I tell you to go to China? I want you to go to China. That was given to me, so I went to China. When Pastor John, he and I talked about this, that he was going to be out of town for this weekend. He's down in San Diego, if you're wondering about where he's at right now, sending off Hannah's parents to Japan. Whoa, what a coincidence. So they'll be back by, I think, Tuesday evening. So I shared with Pastor John, I'll be talking about that particular theme, rediscovering your first love. So I was preparing that message, but then it just dawned on me, we have a special guest coming this weekend to our church. He is a missionary to Japan, and who just came back for 6 months home assignment, basically coming back to the States and recuperating and getting ready for another term. And when he goes back with his wife in April, so he's here with us. And he spoke in first service, and he was speaking again in third service. But I thought, how I went to China, because I really felt God was calling me. This gentleman, now he's older than I am. He has white hairs. He left this land at the age of 60 to go to Japan. So I wanted to take the opportunity for him to join me, and I have a few questions on the same theme. Why he went to Japan? What is he doing over there? How we can, as a community of believers who've been supporting him in his ministry for the past 3.5 years, how we can pray for them, his ministry more specifically. So I'm going to invite, this is missionary Reverend T.H. Yang, in Korean, Yang Taek-ho missionary. 우리 성사님 나오시겠습니다. So I'm going to invite him to come. Why don't we welcome with a round of applause?
Good morning.
Oh, I think it's better than mine. The clip on microphone. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Do you have an English name, by the way? No, you don't.
I don't.
Reverend Yang. Well, I have the first question. Could you tell us about your background and what you're doing and all that? Just a little bit with this congregation.
Yeah, we came to the States about 41 years ago.
1975.
1975, yeah. And my professional life, actually in America, it began when I was 29 and as an engineer and working for Lynch Communication in Reno, Nevada. And then moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, to a company called Alcatel, which is the second largest telecommunications company after the AT&T, and worked there. And then I moved to here, Portland, Oregon. I worked for Intel Corporation. At my 43, I quit from Intel and I moved to Los Angeles to study theology at Fuller Theological Seminary. And it was I was 43 years old, yes. And I became an ordained pastor through PCUSA, Presbyterian Church USA. And now I'm a member of a denomination called the CRC, Christian Reformed Church, yes. And
I know these things.
Yeah, I planted 2 churches and worked for one existing the church in Los Angeles throughout my pastoral experiences. If I may talk about my experience as a layperson, before becoming a pastor, I was a choir director for 3.5 years and a worship leader, and I love to sing praises. I love to sing praises this morning, and
Grateful.
I harmonized that, and if I knew that song well, but yes. Unfortunately, you guys are so well, wonderful. And I was youth pastor 3.5 years at the Bethel Presbyterian Church before I moved down to Los Angeles. At that time, I was working for Intel Corporation, and same time I also taught youth groups for 3.5 years. And I'm not really sure whether this could be an accomplishment or not, but while I was working or as a pastor in Los Angeles, I organized and planned and organized a 5-day mission conference in Los Angeles. We called LAMC. About 1,500 people attended for 5 days. We produced 43 mission hopefuls. Yes. And I was the first one out of that. So I could be the one, yes.
It's just, you can tell in a summary, he had a great life here in the States. And working for Intel in Portland, Oregon, that's a good job. But then at the end of the day, he had to go to China, not China. This whole China thing is in there.
It's okay.
It's okay, right near China, Japan. So I wonder, what happened? Why did you decide to go to Japan?
It was while I was working for Intel Corporation as a commodity manager, and I tripped to Japan to visit Toshiba and Toppan, and for a mission to introduce the new product called Pentium system. That time, so 1990, 91, I went there, and then I facilitate the involvement, their involvement to the new development, the product, the systems, so as part suppliers that we needed and for the system. While I was strolled down to Tokyo, the street was so clean. I was so amazed by that. But not I was amazed by the street, but I was amazed by the people who maintained the street. So clean and neat. The people were standing in a row, for waiting for the buses, and I was so amazed by their attitude and the quality of their thoughts. And then I also thought about if you look at this, Tokyo is the world's biggest the town and the city. If you compare with the Los Angeles or New York, it's so dirty. I just couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then a thought came into my heart and said, what about Christianity in Japan? It was much less than a percentage at that time. But what if they become a Christian? They will steal all the law from God, And so I thought, well, that would be a good challenge. And I began to toy that idea for a little bit. And in 1992, there was a conference held in Chicago called Korean World Mission Conference. There were about 3,000 people gathered together. 400 missionaries all around the world came and attended and taught us about the mission. And I attend all 5 days, beginning from 5 o'clock morning prayer time to 10 o'clock, all the revival services, all 5 days. In the afternoon, there was a workshops, and I attend every workshop, and I talk to all the missionaries and talk about, things that I wanted to know. And after 5 days, the 5 days was so blessing. I was so blessed. The time when I took the plane, coming back to Portland, Oregon, I felt like I was sitting on the globe. I can do almost anything about the mission, And I was so excited. And then the same year, I went down to Los Angeles and I met and talked with my mentor pastor. And after he listened to my story, he said, well, Mr. Yang, I feel like you are getting called from God. So my wife and I, talk about it and say, let's pray together for a few months and see what God's going to talk to us about. And so about month and a half later, we were so conformed. So we decided to send the application to Fuller Theological Seminary. We received admission. We sent the resignation to Intel Corporation for a month's time, and then we packed everything, went down to Los Angeles. That was the beginning of my...
That's a journey that he will eventually end up in Japan after some 15 years or so. You know, it's interesting because when he went to Japan, like I'm hearing, you know, on the surface, everything was really good. How many of you guys been to Japan, by the way? Raise your hand, let me see. You know, just very impressive, you know, it just things are, but then you go, you know, he as a Christian perspective, beyond what you see, what you can see. Japan is one country that has least Christians in the whole world. That really caused him to think about it, and then eventually there was some, you know, moments where God reconfirmed or God made sure that this was, you know, what I want you to do. Very similar to, in a way, you know, how I felt for China. He was 43. Did you hear that? Did you get that? He was 43 when he went to where? Seminary. Yeah. He was working for where? Intel. Think about that. So if you're under 43, you still have time. God might be calling you too. Now, so, you know, listening to his story, I mean, I'm going to ask just one last question. His life as engineer for, you know, 20-some years or so, working in a church, like you heard, choir director, youth, CM, children's teacher, youth pastor, you know, all these things. And then seminary training, planting churches, all came together. I want to ask him, was that a good prep, in a way, for your work now in Japan? What do you do, and how that really helped you, equipped you, and then also, what are you doing in Japan right now?
Yeah. You know, all that throughout my journey with Christ, you know, beginning age at 12, when I attended the middle school, that is a missionary school. And all that, I acquired almost little skill by skill, and all that added together. And it was useful. You know, if I was working with the children, you know, the things that I acquired in the past was also recalled into, and then I was using it. And it was the same thing happening in Japan. I happened to taught 17 children, and they wanted to learn English, and I taught them. And then I, you know, taught the Gospels and all things. It was so wonderful. But, you know, all this kind of stuff, and not only that, but also I also taught guitar, you know, to youth group in Portland, Oregon. But not only that, but also I taught ukulele in Japan, and all ladies. It is because I want to teach them, I want to evangelize them. So I use all my skill just for the glory of God. And right now, I'm going to move to, and by the way, I was in Japan, in Tokyo, Japan, for the past 3.5 years. And then now we are going to move to Aomori area. Aomori is the main island, the most northern and, you know, part of the main island, which is very cold. And it's really, you know, I don't know, icy cold. Yeah, that would be the easy one. And then there we're going to move up there, and then we're going to plant a church. And the town we called Asamushi, this little town, maybe about 2,000 to 3,000 people living in there. And then, Pastor, I was going to ask you to see if you can help us in this prayer, you know, together. Is that you know, Lord, give this town to us, just like Joshua in the book of Joshua, you know, chapter 14. There's Caleb went to Joshua and said, you know, God promised give us this land, but Joshua, give me this hillside. It was so bold, statements. And I know there's only 2 Christians at this point, and living in this Asamushi, that I'm going to work with them to build a church there. And I'm going to ask you to see if you can pray together for the next few years or so, that Lord give us this town, to making it as a Christian village. That's what our...
Missionary, not Yang, Yang. We'll be going back to Japan and a town, region called Aomori. Aomori is Japanese term. So, we in KM, we do pray for our missionaries. So EM, I think when you have a public worship like this, it's good to include these missionaries and pray for them. Now you've seen Mr. Yang, Reverend Yang, how he looks like, right, where he's going to be. So, pray for and with him and his family, his wife, and they were able to plant a church, and that will flourish, and as many Japanese as possible can come into the kingdom of God. Why don't we give him a big hand for what he's sharing? And I'm going to thank you. Wrap up and pray. Again, I know many of you are busy with your own daily chores and your professions and all that. But again, God has called us with a purpose. The way God called Abraham. He wants us to be a source of blessings because we are blessed to many people around us. It starts from here and over there, the ends of the earth. Blessing all the families, all the nations, all the tongues and tribes will come to know this great God we call Abba Father. So it is my prayer. As you live your life here in the States, wherever you are, whatever you are going to do, may God use you and your profession, greatly, abundantly, that you would be a source of blessings.